All right, guys, as promised, here is one of the two videos that I told you I would make to help make sure that you have what you need for factoring on your homework tonight. Remember, we are solving a quadratic equation. So the first couple of days we were just factoring. We didn't have to do anything. There was no x equals, or in this case, r equals. You were literally just factoring them into two separate sets of parentheses. Today we actually have to take it a step further and solve. Okay, the very first thing that we have to notice is when we look at an equation like the one we have, 5r squared equals 488r minus 64, in order for you to solve a quadratic equation, whether you're solving by factoring, solving by square roots, using the quadratic formula, whatever you're using, it has to be in standard form. You have to have everything on the left and a 0 on the right, or vice versa. I mean, you just have to have that 0 by itself. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is subtract 48r, and since we're in FST, we're in the big kid math now, I'm going to go ahead and do add the 64 at the same time. So when I do that, I get 5r squared minus 48r plus 64 equals 0, which is what I need. I need everything on one side and 0 on the other. I've double checked my signs to make sure that I'm ready to go. At this point, we can factor. So what I need to do is multiply 5 times 64, right? And over here, we will have our little T-chart. I need two numbers that when I multiply them, 5 times 64, I get 320. Okay. And when I add them, I should get a negative 48 over here. Okay. So again, when I'm multiplying, I get 320. When I'm going to add them, I'm going to get a negative 48. If you are not sure what these numbers might actually be, the easiest thing to do is go through and list the factor pairs. I know it's like time consuming and we don't really want to have to do that, but sometimes in our bigger numbers we do actually need to do that. So I know 1 and 320 are factor pairs. I know 2 and 160. I know 4 and 80. I know 5 and a 64. I know 8 and 40. I know 10 and 32, and I know 16 and 20. And those are all my factor pairs of 320. And I have to now pay attention to my signs. When I multiply these two numbers, whatever these two numbers happen to be, when I multiply them, I get a positive number. And when I add them, I get a negative number. That means every single one of my factor pairs needs to be negative. Okay. So I make sure that all of those are negative. And then I go back and I say, okay, you know what? I know that when I multiply negative 8 times a negative 40, I get a positive 320. And when I add negative 8 to negative 40, I get a negative 48. So those are the two numbers that I'm going to split and use to regroup. Now, remember, when we split this negative 48 in the middle, it doesn't matter if I do negative 8 minus 40 or negative 40 minus 8. You can double check and look at what's on the ends. I have a 5r squared to start, and I have a 64 at the end. To me, in my head, it's actually going to be a little easier to put the 40 with the 5 and the 8 with the 64. So that's how I'm going to write it. So minus 40r minus 8r. And again, that is our whole split and regroup method. We have to remember that we are solving this so that equals 0 has to come down. So now that we've split it, we are going to regroup it, and we're going to factor out the GCF from the first pair and factor out the GCF from the second pair. So my GCF in the first pair is just going to be a 5r. And when I factor that out, I will have an r minus 8 left over. And then my GCF in the second pair is just going to be a negative 8. So negative 8 out front, and then I will have an r minus 8 in parentheses. So that equals 0. And then all I have to do is rewrite it. My r minus 8, even though it was there twice in the previous line, it only really shows up once because it had been distributed. And then, of course, everything that is left over, my 5r minus 8, gets its own set of parentheses, and that still equals 0. So at this point now, all we have to do is split our two parentheses up, two groups up, and I will have an r minus 8 equals a 0, and I will have a 5r minus 8 equals 0. Over here, I get an r equals an 8, and over here, I get my 5r equals 8, or r equals 8/5. So we have a quadratic equation with two real number solutions. Okay, so just real quick, I will show you the entire screen, hopefully, there we go, so that you can pause it on this screen if you need to just kind of look at everything through it, okay? Got to go back to the normal screen to shut it off. Hope this helps. I'm going to go make the other one with just taking the square roots.